People always tell me to get out of my London bubble and do some reporting in the countryside. But sometimes, luckily enough, the countryside comes to me. We're here today in Westminster, where farmers are protesting the Labour government's planned introduction of inheritance tax, which will impact farms worth £1 million or above. Some farmers say that this tax is going to hit them very hard. They've got slim profit margins and they're already hurting from having to come off EU subsidies. But others say that farmland has been used as a way for already very rich people to dodge their tax liabilities. Campaigners argue that this planned change to inheritance tax is going to hit family farms especially hard. Obviously, big corporates, the few that exist in this country, won't have to pay inheritance tax at all. They also argue that this is going to negatively impact the UK's food security, as farmers will be forced to sell up and will be importing more of our food from abroad. What the Labour government says is that most farmers aren't going to be impacted by this tax, that really it's around the £3 million mark when the proposed changes kick in. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert in rural affairs, but luckily Novara has our very own in-house farmer who gave me this useful tip. If someone says that they own 200 acres or fewer, that's actually a really, really small farm. If you're talking about 500 acres or over, that's actually really big and you're objectively quite well off. So that's going to be our rule of thumb for today. We're going to be finding out how rich are farmers really. So one of the questions that I'm trying to answer today is how wealthy is a farmer who has £1 or £2 million worth of land value? Does that make someone very rich or not very rich in your mind?
Asset rich, cash poor. So all of their money is tied up in land, in their property, which they need to be able to produce the food that we put on people's tables.
And can you just talk me through this pun?
Well, I'm a sheep farmer, so yeah, the government needs to make a U-turn.
I'm sorry, it's been nice to talk to you, but you belong in prison for that. You really, really do. Some people might hear, OK, £1 million in assets or 2 or 3, that sounds like quite a lot.
It isn't. If you live in Cumbria, £1.5 million is your farmhouse. £250,000 is every barn, because in theory you can get planning permission to convert it, which they won't do because they're farmers and they want to feed the nation. Your land is worth way more because types like the ones in the Labour Party will buy it as a second home, and they'll have their 3 acres of pony paddocks, and they won't be paying tax because they can get within the £3 million or the £2 million or whatever it happens to be. If you've got a proper functioning farm, you're going to be way over £2-3 million. Your stock alone is going to be potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds. There was a guy on the wireless the other day on Farming Today. 1,600 cows, £2,000 a head, you do the maths. That's straight over the inheritance tax limit. It is despicable.
How many acres do you farm?
220.
220, that's about average, isn't it? That's the average size farm.
Yeah, there's a lot of farms, so a lot of thousands of acres, so a lot of farms, ours is relatively small.
Do you think that there's any size farm that should pay inheritance tax? Do you think there should be a threshold at all, or should it be a blanket exemption?
I think there should. I think the only people that should pay, I think we should potentially put a cap on large businesses buying farms and getting agricultural property relief. That is wrong. I get that. But if it's been actively farmed, and especially if it's a family farm, no way, they shouldn't pay a penny. But I totally agree with you. Corporations buying up thousands of acres definitely need stopping.
So may I just ask, because a lot of our audience, needs to get a picture in their head of what your farm is like. How many acres is your farm, roughly?
We've got about 800 odd acres of land. Mostly arable and conservation crops and things like that. We're going to be quite badly affected by this. Obviously, there's several aspects to the taxation. It's not just on the land; it's on the business as well, and also it's Cotswold farmhouses are disproportionately valuable. And so they're going to be in the tax bracket anyway, let alone the land. So it's quite serious.
We're Lincolnshire farmers, family farm, a sort of multi-generational farm.
Your family farm, how big is that in acres roughly?
So we're just under 1,000 acres, and we have 3.
Sounds like quite a lot. Is that quite big?
It's not for arable farming in the east of the country, and we are 3 generations living on the farm and supporting a lot more people around there.
So how are you going to be impacted personally?
Well, I'm not going to be able to afford to pay it when my old man, so, well, yeah, pretty much. I'm not going to be able to pay to afford it, so I'll have to do something else, won't I? And that's, 5 generations. Been on the same farm for 5 generations, and it's just undoable.
And in terms of how big the farm is, in terms of acres, roughly?
We got about 350 acres and about, he's milking 150 cows. That's gone.
And that is, just for context, not a big farm, 350 acres.
On the home farm, it's just my dad, my brother and my mum. I work away, but yeah, that's all of our livelihoods gone.
Lots of cheering and booing. I have no idea why.
My parents are very elderly, and we've got a small farm, so we shouldn't be worried about the problem.
What size in terms of acreage, roughly?
50 acres, and so 1.2 million maybe it's worth. But the problem is that we've got a lot of infrastructure on that farm. Fencing, there's 100,000. Buildings, 500,000. Tracks, all these infrastructure things that you have to have for cattle and so on are all invested in the land. And the other thing we've got invested in the land is our skills and our understanding of the land. So when that tax comes, which will come inevitably fairly soon for me, my father's 90, when that tax comes, that will split the farm, and all that knowledge and training and knowledge of the farm and the land will go.
So what the government are saying, just to put their case across, is that most farmers aren't going to be affected. Really, it's going to kick in at around £3 million worth of assets. What do you say to that?
Most farmers, we're a small farmer and we're affected. We're a tiny farmer, well below the average, 150 acres. So we will be hugely affected by this.
I think this is going to hit a lot of just not big farmers who just happen to be caught out by the land value, and they've no intention of ever selling it, and they don't make enough money to pay for that inheritance tax that they're going to incur, Ash. And actually, I don't think anyone is saying, we shouldn't have inheritance tax, or they're just saying it's really been badly thought, not really considered at all. And we need them to take it away and think it, and we think the numbers are wrong.
Of the sort of 60-odd thousand English commercial farms, I think the average sort of acreage is 250 acres, something like that. Most of the people here today will be on that, but probably those who it will affect most are, as Minette Batters, the former NFU president, said, will be affected from the sort of 200 up to 800 acre farms. But it's not just the land; it's the buildings on the land, it's the cost of machinery, it's cost of the kit, the livestock. That is what I think there's not a sort of general understanding around.
So what do you think the unintended consequences of this change to inheritance tax might be?
Well, I think it's not going to do what they think it's going to do. So they think, firstly, they're not going to raise that much money. Secondly, it's going to make small farmers and medium-sized farmers have to sell up. Who's going to buy it? Because there's still an inheritance tax benefit. It's going to be big private equity people, or big people looking to invest in green carbon offsetting and so on. So it's actually going to target the people it's going to target the people, the opposite people that they actually want to hit.
Could you tell me a little bit about the farm? So, how big is it in acres? What do you make?
It's about 4,000 acres. It's mostly arable. It is
4,000. Is that quite a lot?
That's quite a big one. Yeah. So I mean, we, in a sense, we would be, very much the target and the ideological target in terms of what Rachel Reeves is conceiving of when she thinks she's attacking, who she thinks she's targeting in terms of her tax. But the reality is, if you see all the people here, it's not bigger landowners like we are of sort of thousands of acres. You're down to small holders of sort of a few hundred acres.
Do you think there should be any inheritance tax on farms at all? Or should the threshold be different?
Well, I think the system as it was before enabled farms at least to survive and continue as going concerns by putting this inheritance tax. The problem is that as people have said, it's asset rich, cash poor. So in order to fund any kind of inheritance tax bill, you're going to have to sell off the capital. And as anyone who's involved, particularly in arable farming, there's economies of scale that are very important. And so it's just not going to be viable. So whatever size of business, you're eating into the very, fabric of the assets that produce any income whatsoever, which even for a bigger farm like ours is not a huge amount of, it's not an efficient way of generating an income.
Sorry, Lee. Hey, no, I was born here, mate.
Where are you from?
I'm from Novara Media. I was just going to ask, how do you think...
I'm not talking to you, clear off. I'm talking to some real people.
Why won't you talk
to real people, yeah. Anyway, how you going, guys? All right.
Communists. No, it's what you said.
Would you like to...
Call yourself a communist.
Overbreeding of your sort.
Sorry, overbreeding of my sort?
No, you're YouTube. There we go. I don't want to speak to you.
Sorry, you said overbreeding of my sort.
Go look at your YouTube.
What did you mean by that? Overbreeding of my sort, sir. You also called me an immigrant earlier.
I like you, but you did call yourself a communist.
I did call myself a communist.
It was a good clip. It was a good clip.
A good clip.
Right.
Oh, it's nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Have a lovely day. Overbreeding of my sort, eh? May I ask how specifically you're going to be impacted by these proposed changes?
Well, huge, because, we've got nearly 200 acres. So obviously land is worth money, but we have no money in the bank. But we have
200 acres is quite small for a farm, right?
It is, yeah. But we will be impacted, definitely. We've done the sums, and we're very sad that we have children and we have grandchildren. And, the idea was that it was going to be handed over, and now I think the government doesn't want this. And, we have, all we've done is worked hard. We've done nothing else.
4,000 acres sounds like quite a lot. Like that sounds like wealth to me. Like, would your family consider themselves wealthy or not feel particularly wealthy?
No, there's no doubt that it's a substantial asset. But that doesn't mean that there's lots of cash sloshing around on top of that. And I agree we're not in the position that many of the people here would be. But at the same time, you're going to have to carve off the land, which is the very thing that you're trying to preserve in order to just basically continue to live, just carry on a way of life. And, it may sound on paper like a very valuable asset, but my family doesn't live an especially sort of extravagant lifestyle, and we're probably, in a better position than a lot.
And so, roughly, if you had to pin down what your hourly wage is, how much do you make an hour?
Well, pennies.
Pennies, yes.
Yeah, pennies.
It's more a vacation than a job.
I mean, how much do you get per hour if you had to work it out?
Pins. 2-3 quid, if that. Farmers don't get paid, but you have the lifestyle, and we accept that. We're not denying that. We don't try and take that away from us at the end, everything we've worked for. And it's ours, it's been bought and paid for many times, it's been paid tax on before. This isn't, you know what I mean? It could have been death duties on it before, in the past, years ago, and things like, it's all been paid income tax, all these things.
You got a shit-on stammer for your local farmer.
An arrestable offence, but fine.
Money's tight, as it is with everyone. But us especially, we're working his arses off. Well, sorry.
No, we're not Ofcom regulated, you can swear.
That's all right, we're working his arses off for something that's never getting anywhere. We're never going to become millionaires no matter what we do. We just work.
What do you mean, cash millionaires?
Yeah, cash millionaires, whatever we do. We're just here to feed people, look after people and make sure that, we enjoy it.
Are you someone that would be impacted by the proposed changes?
I'm not sure myself, but because I've got other family members, but Probably so. And a lot of my friends will be who can't make it here today because they're all out clearing the roads of the snow that we've all had. They're helping the country when the country ain't helping them.
So someone might from a distance go, all right, well, if you've got £3 or £4 million in assets, that makes you really rich. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
Not at all. No, because...
Never, ever see the money, but they've worked for that money. Now this government's taking them off him.
Yeah.
And this government won't last 5 minutes, I'll tell you. Because what they're doing to farming, I've had 47 years of it, and what they're doing to farming's wrong. They're just grabbing here and there.
Is it more than just the inheritance tax? Are there other things which are...
Things. Yeah. I mean, I've just come on pension and they've took me fuel money away. Do you know what I mean? They're just grabbing, and these old people, they've fought wars and everything. Now they're wanting their fuel. It's wrong. It's wrong what they're doing.
One of the things that I've been hearing from people today is that it's not just inheritance tax that farmers are getting hit by. So there's the tax on fertiliser. There's also the move from EU subsidies to conservation grants, that money falling through. How have you been impacted by the? Have you been impacted by the sort of wider collection of changes?
We're all impacted by tax changes and so on, absolutely. But you know, we have to cope with that, and it'll get passed on ultimately in the price of food.
When you're done, sorry guys, this is a communist. I don't mean to interrupt your interview. She's a communist. So Ash, when you're done, you come and interview me, Nick Tenconi, UKIP leader. By all means, carry on with the interview.
So I'm here to talk to farmers, not politicians today. Is that okay?
Interrupt. She's communist. She supports.
Didn't the communists take away the farms from the farmers?
Yeah.
That's what you support.
What are your thoughts on Stalin and what he did?
I'm here to talk to farmers, not you, mate.
Don't interrupt your interview any further. She's a full-blown communist. Check out her bio. She calls herself a luxury communist. Disgusting. She is a communist.
Sorry, you were talking about how you were... you were talking to me about how you're impacted by the wider body of change.
Yeah, we were all impacted by those, absolutely. But I think this one is one that you can't really prepare for because the sums of money are so significant.
So can't lie, there has been a bit of hostility today. But from what I can tell, that's not from people who are farmers themselves. That's from far-right opportunists who have showed up today. I've got to say, not in the sort of numbers that we've seen with Tommy Robinson demos. Do better, lads. And so I suppose my last question is this. You talked about food security and the need to grow our own food. How do you think these changes might impact the country's ability to feed itself?
Well, we'll have to import, won't we? We'll have to get into bed with the Americans and have hormone-fed beef and chlorine-washed chicken, and we'll import, wheat from Ukraine, and we know how that worked out. That's just going to be fantastic. I just think this government don't understand. They've made a big mistake, and they do not have the backbone to accept it and to give people a chance to plan. We all need to contribute towards the economy because it is completely wrecked. I personally am quite happy to pay an extra 1% of income tax. I earn naff all, I'm on minimum wage, but I will pay that extra penny on income tax because it's fair.
What are the things that you're seeing in the future that's going to make food security more important in this country?
Well, I think you can see how unstable things are if you look at this axis with Russia, with North Korea, with Iran. We should be prepared. We turned a blind eye in World War II. We should be prepared. And we do need to make sure that we keep growing food and we don't keep having land turned over. Why is the best quality fertile farmland? Why is the government now wanting to dump solar panels on it? Solar panels belong on the roofs of buildings, not on prime farmland.
We should be self-sufficient, not importing it in. Bloody, what's her name, Greta? She's all about being green, but we should be able to be self-sufficient. We used to be. And the way the government have been going for a few years is actually reducing the amount of productive land. Like, we get paid to have ground which isn't productive. What's the fucking point in that? I get supporting the environment and all that, but we actually do care about the environment. We're not just out there to kill it.
Do you feel a bit like the policies being made by people who live in cities, don't understand?
Don't have a clue. And I get that there are people out there who have got farming and land and they've got money and it's meant to hit them, but it will hit a lot more than them. The threshold needs to be higher.
One final question, which is if you could send a message directly to Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves today, what would you say?
Reconsider what we're saying. This will affect a lot of farmers. We're producing food for the land, and we also want to respect nature. But if you tax us there's a tax on four cab pickups and all these other taxes that we haven't even spoke about today, or inheritance tax, our small family farm, as an example, small family farm, will go.
Drop this tax on farmers. That is my message, and that's why I'm here today.
It's just a final straw. You know, we've come out of the EU with the farming subsidies is a mess. You can't sign up for the new environmental schemes because they've cancelled the old one without bringing the new one in. It's just sheer government incompetence. And if they had an ounce of decency and an ounce of backbone, what they would have said to the great British public when they were running for election is, I'm really sorry guys, but the economy is completely knackered and you're all just going to have to pay a little bit. So you're not going to like this, but you're going to have to put a penny on income tax because we've subsidised your gas, we've furloughed you, and now we've all got to pay back. But they haven't got the cojones to say that. Instead, what they do is they schmooze the NFU at the annual conference. They promise sunshine and change, and they've certainly brought about change. They are going to decimate the farming industry. Farmers that I love, who I've known for 50 years, have been offered £800,000 to stop farming. And they are 75 and their bodies are broken by early morning, sorry, I'm really cross, and hard labour. And they've turned it down because they're looking after a landscape, they're looking after an ecosystem, they're feeding the nation, and they are looking after a lifestyle. And this government are a bunch of avocado-munching, London-centric arsemongrels who wouldn't know a hedge if it jumped up and bit them on the bum. They wouldn't know a 5-bar gate if they saw one. They do not understand country people, and I am, as you can tell, furious.
And if you could send the message directly to Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves today, what would you say? You're allowed to swear, don't worry.
Fuck off.
The sign says it all right there.
Sign?
Fuck Starmer, support farmer.
What would I say? Be warned. Play with feathers, you get your arse tickled.
You know where's a really bad place to complain about having to work in the cold and the wet and the mud? A protest where you're surrounded by farmers. Right at the start of today, I asked one question. How rich are farmers really? And I've encountered people at both ends of what is really quite a wide spectrum. On the one hand, speaking to people who own about 150 acres. Now, sounds like a lot. On paper, it's a lot in terms of the land value, but that's not a lot when you're thinking about what constitutes a viable farm. And on the other hand, I've just spoken to someone whose family farm is 4,000 acres and feels that that's not an excessive amount of land or asset wealth, but, you know, maybe it is. But it's not just Labour's inheritance tax measures that have got people here feeling betrayed. It's also about the tax on fertilisers. It's also about the fact that EU subsidies haven't been adequately replaced. And I think the backdrop of all this is how little money farmers get compared to what we're spending at the supermarket. So for every pound I spend at Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Asda, a farmer gets 15 pence of that. That's not very much. There has been a small far-right presence here. They particularly objected to my presence. But I don't think that you can call this farmers' protest far-right as such. What's clear, though, is that the likes of Reform are really trying to capitalise politically on this. It's not the Tories, who you might expect, who are owning this issue. So does this spell trouble for Labour? Obviously, most of their MPs represent towns and cities, but there are 100 Labour MPs whose constituencies include substantial rural communities. This could come to bite them in the arse at the next election. But more than that, I think farmers have a kind of totemic power, and it's precisely that totemic power which makes them easy for rich people to hide behind and use them as a sort of pointy end of the stick, concealing their own class interests when it comes to wanting to get around inheritance tax. But I think there's some truth in the fact that farmers are the ones looking out for our food security. And if ultimately, because of this set of policies, we end up with a greater reliance on imports or massive corporate agribusinesses, that can't be a good thing.